Hey, friend. Today I'm talking with my friend and colleague, Brannan Sirratt. She's a book coach, ghostwriter, and an editor who's helped countless authors transform their ideas into powerful books. She believes that before any manuscript evaluation or edit or even marketing push can make an impact, authors need one crucial thing, and I can't agree more, and that is clarity. Today, you are about to have a treat in this idea of how we get to this ever elusive clarity. I think is one of the most powerful, you really can't do much without clarity. And someone who helps you kind of get through the stuff, the ideas, and the mountain of wisdom that you have to distill your ideas down to that clarity is crucial. And Brannan is the queen bee of all of this. So I'm lucky to have her here with me today. We've been working together. We've even worked together previously at our old former scribe world. And today I'm excited because I want to bring some of her wisdom to the show. Brannan, what's up? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I love that queen bee dig there. I'll take it.
You're so welcome. I think that's it's one way to define you. I mean, amongst other ways, but I'm really excited to have you here because that's I feel like something that a lot of authors struggle with, not intentionally. They're full of wisdom. They got years of experience and expertise, and it's just kind of hard to take the waterfall and go up to it and get a cup of that wisdom, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
how I try to distill it. But so can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of a clear direction before writing, and what mistakes do you see authors making when they skip this very vital step?
Yeah. I think that first of all, I was going to ask if you would use that waterfall analogy because it's absolutely gorgeous and
Oh,
really
thank
what's
you.
happening. Like when you're writing fiction, for example, you have the whole like universe to choose from and you can imagine any possibility and you can pull from it and you know you're going to go make those choices. But when you're writing nonfiction, and you're going backwards to like your personal universe and
Mm,
then looking out to like the universe of every single potential reader that you're going to have and every potential interaction that the book might create, choosing what to write doesn't feel so much like imagination. It feels like a constraint or a restriction. And then I
mm,
see authors trying to choose something from every possible universe, every lesson they've ever learned, every story they've ever lived, every reader who might interact with them, everything they might do with the book. And then suddenly you have this big, massive mess of a project
yeah.
that speaks to no one because we've only like skimmed the surface of all of these different spaces. So clear direction for me is like really choosing what journey you're going to take in this moment. Like, what's the thing you want to talk about for the next 5 or 10 years, which is realistic
Mm,
for a book because you're got to work on it. You got to talk with your people while you're collaborating and creating it. And then you've got to talk to people like you while you're figuring out how to bring it out into the world. And if
mm,
you're burned out on the topic midway through, you're not going to want to keep having those conversations. So, figuring out what is this journey that I'm taking right now and trusting that all of those other universes and potentials still have time to come to fruition. Like you can get to them. But if you only skim the surface of all of them, you won't even ever take one journey, much less all of them.
mm. So powerful. Yeah, and I like that distinction between fiction and nonfiction and how we kind of come to those worlds. Because you're right, there's a lot of creativity here in fiction, but even with that, you still kind of need clarity. But
Right.
I think you're right in that when we're writing nonfiction, specifically business books and stuff, we have so much knowledge to sift through. And, making sure, by the way, I got that analogy from Emily Gindelsbarger, the
Ah,
waterfall and cup.
I love
Um,
it.
it's
We're just
so
going to keep
beautiful.
spreading it around. It's
I
beautiful.
know it is beautiful because she's wonderful and just a wise one when it comes to distilling those ideas. I love that. So, but you're right. We have to figure out a way to distill our ideas and be excited and enthusiastic to continue talking about them. because not only are you going to share about them on social with friends and of course write about it over and over. And I feel like that's something that a lot of authors get tired of. They're like, a lot of them, when they come to me, they're like, man, I'm so tired of just looking at my manuscript. Right. And I'm like, oh, the fun has yet to begin, my friend. Right. Like, wait till you see what happens next. And, it's kind of sad, but like, I feel like when people really do finish their manuscript, they're just exhausted. They're so
Yeah.
burned out because I think the lack of clarity, like you said, especially with other editors and stuff, they kind of just compound the book with too much, and it does get exhausting. So,
Yeah.
how do you help authors get from idea overload to a focused strategic plan? Like, what is a methodology that you deploy when you meet an author with these expansive
Yeah.
ideas?
The first thing I always ask is why a book? Why are why are you doing this? It's weird. It's a weird, hard job. Like, I
Why?
want to know why you're taking this on. And that started, I used to ask that question because I didn't see myself as a writer, even though I had ghostwritten 50 books. I didn't see myself as a writer. And so I would meet these authors and be like, this is a weird choice, man. Why are you here? But over time, like I've realized there are 1,000 different ways that you can bring your message to the world and create that movement or whatever it is that you're trying to do beyond the book. There are so many different ways you can do that: a podcast, or speaking, or teaching, or blogging is valid, like all kinds of ways that you can bring your message to the world. And a book is such a unique, nichey way of doing that, that if you don't have a really good reason beyond, I think it will make me famous or something like that, there there's not a reason to put your energy into a book until you're feeling that pull, like really going, no, I think there's something here that belongs in a book. I think I need to be able to have this conversation in a more intense way, like a book provides, and other mediums don't. Or I think that this is the best way to connect with my audience, or something bigger than just the social obligation of big names have books. Um, if you're not feeling that bigger pull, then we stop there. When I meet somebody, I'm like, nope,
Mhm.
you have a lot of brilliance and you have a lot of ideas, but I don't know if a book is right now the thing that you need to do. If someone else told you you need to write a book and you're not feeling it yourself, then don't even do it. So that's
Mhm.
my first like stop point. Like you've got to
Right.
be feeling that pull yourself.
Right.
And then after that, I want to know what you're going to be doing with the book. So, how do you envision giving it to a real person? Who is that real person? How does that interaction go? I always assign them into something that's like a dream state meditative type exercise. That's like picture the whole interaction around the book moving from you to someone else, and like forget what the book looks like, forget what the words are, forget what's inside of it. That will all come. But I want you to imagine it being out in the world and you doing something with it. And then tell me what that interaction is like. And again, if they have nothing, which that rarely happens. If they have nothing, then you don't see it yet. You don't see
Mhm.
that 5 to 10 year conversation yet. And there's not going to be a way for us to distill down what goes inside of that book, without becoming arbitrary and performative with it. But when you see it, when you're like, oh, here's the person that I'm going to give it to, and this is what it felt like. And usually people cry when they tell me that story, like, oh,
Mhm.
I didn't expect it. It felt like this thing. That becomes something we can anchor the entire project around and always come back and ask, so this chapter choice you're wanting to make, how would that person receive it? Is that person ready for it? Every single decision that follows in the book creation process can go back to that moment of
Mhm.
your vision of handing that book to a real person.
I love that so much. We talk about that a lot, even in marketing, right? Like your avatar, like who's this message going to resonate the most with, right? And then the copy, the website, the colors, the everything, right? It's thinking in the packaging format, but the book is really at the heart of this thing, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, as they kind of enter the packaging, if you will, or open this package, right? Um, all the aspects are like speaking to them
Mhm.
emotionally, graphically, poetically, whatever it is. Like it's all speaking to them in ways that makes you want to rip the thing open and like get in there and like dig deeper, right? But I love that because at the core of it, that's what really we should be thinking about, and that's where so much clarity comes from. Because then that's your anchor point, like you just said. Like if it doesn't really tie to this experience that this reader is having, this one reader,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of people, I don't know if you get this, right? Um, I want to help everyone.
Yeah.
My book is for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, everybody has this problem. Everybody, because we tend to think that the knowledge that we encapsulate, because I've done this, everyone does this, we tend to sort of um, compare out,
Yep.
right? Instead of like compare it back in. When you compare,
Mm.
especially in nonfiction, right? Compare it back in, it's like this person typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the younger version of you. Most
Yeah.
people's like really good books are just written for the younger version of them or the person that's technically behind them on that ladder. Not that they're better, they're just more experienced now.
Yeah.
And I find that there's a lot of truth there and a lot of truth that can be revealed that is much easier to get to that clarity. But, and this is my next kind of question, is how do you deal with the authors that it's kind of like going to therapy at first. You kind of reveal the outlayer, the outer layers, right? Before you kind of
Yeah.
build that trust. And then you finally go into the deeper stuff, the shame, the secrets, the
Yeah.
I want validation, I want fame, I want whatever, because it happens. Like, not to say that all authors go through that or whatever, right? And to a degree, I'm going to be honest here. Like, I wanted some kind of validation when I wrote my
Yeah.
book, right? Like, we
Yeah.
all do, whether it's from our family members or from the world or whatever. I've had a author merely say they just wanted a parent to approve of
Mm.
them, and to them that meant Wall Street bestseller, selling millions of copies so that they can finally get their respect. And it's like, I'm not sure that's going to do that.
Nope.
I'm sorry. I'd
Nope.
rather spend
Nope.
that money and energy in therapy and
Yeah.
learn about it that way. And with all due respect, and it's like, I get it. I get that
Yeah.
that thing can probably bring you that attention and whatever, but God, can you speak on that a little bit? The deeper sense of
Yeah.
where authors kind of
I
need
think
that.
this is huge because there's a lot of the industry, nonfiction on like the hybrid side probably, and then fiction, the traditional side definitely picks up both. But the book industry, the publishing industry preys on that need for validation by playing
Mhm.
up the idea of we have chosen you and we have selected you among the masses to be our next author, and there's
Yeah, and
a
it goes in
lot of
advance, and
right.
yeah,
There's an advance, or we don't let everyone pay us money for our hybrid solution, like there's all kinds of mystique around we're providing you that validation.
mm,
And I approach it the opposite, kind of. Not that I don't validate them. Partly what people should know about me when they work with me is that my face doesn't lie. So like
I know it's good.
if something comes up and it's not good, like my face will tell you
You go,
before my
you
words
gonna
do.
see it
Like
before you hear it. Yeah.
you will know there's something we got to work through. Like, sorry, friend, we've got work to do. So like I can't do that like nonsense,
Yeah.
you are the chosen one thing, but also I just want to run as far away from that exploitation as possible. Um, because I think the biggest power that comes from writing a book is stepping into the authority and the audacity of being an author, and someone else validating you doesn't give that to you. Just
Mm,
like an achievement doesn't give you the love of a parent. It doesn't earn the love of a parent. If your parent and you have a weird dynamic, that's deeper than an achievement. An achievement is not going to fix that. That's a deeper layer. Similarly, if you have issues with how confident you feel in your message and your story and your projects and how you are in the world, having a book isn't going to fix that for you. Having a book, the product of the book isn't going to fix that for you.
Mm,
But if you go through the writing process knowing that you're building up these muscles of audacity and that you're using that clarity not just to like be clear for someone else to understand you, but for you to like really see yourself as an authority and to see yourself as an author and to see yourself with this encapsulated wisdom from a moment in time or an expertise that you've developed or whatever. If you're using that as a way to create clarity so that you see yourself clearer and you see your message clearer first, then that translates outward and you can go step out into the world as an author. And it does not matter at that point how you're published. That's the kind of author that will go from help me make this good enough to be sold traditionally or help me make this good enough to, do these external things to oh my God, we've written it and I just have to get it out into the world. I don't care if it's a PDF at this point. People, I want to give it to people. Like that transformation is what I'm looking for in authors, where they are so clear on their message and so emboldened to share it from their own self, like it's coming out of them and they can't stop it. That's what I want the writing process to do, which is why we have to start with that picture of there is something here more than just a book. Because
mm,
if we don't even start there, then we have way too far to go for me to get you all the way around to like, oh, this message has to get into the world no matter what.
yeah, I love that. Um, I think it's so powerful because when creating any creative project, really, um, there's this tension between who it's for, the vision for it, all this stuff, and having a landing place for it, and all these things. But then there's this other tension of like, this is something I want to create the way I want to do it, and I want to say the things I want to say, and it's there is no right formula for that. I think it's every person's chemistry, right? Project, really, of finding the right elements that ties those things together enough to feel like, you know what, my stamp on this is my validation, and I can give a damn what you think about it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I know who's going to help, and I know it's going to help them well, and that's who I'm targeting, right?
Yep.
And it'll lead me to XYZ opportunities because I'm going to use it as a tool, as a creative tool to reach those individuals. And when authors really like lean into that, because you're right, at first there's so much stuff in their way. Like, I want to get on Oprah, I want to get on Rogan, I want to, like, there's all this stuff between, and that's like saying like, and I didn't realize this even when I first wrote my book, right? I was like, oh, this is gonna be dope. Like, I have the right story, but I also knew, like, I'm like, I want this book to be in classrooms,
Mm-hmm.
in universities, and in like small retreat leadership conference things that I know will kind of make an impact on these three levels. But really, who it's for is my nephew Ahmed. Like, I knew that. Like, I didn't know that until like Emily kind of like
Yeah.
blocked me in a way. And this is why you need someone
Yep.
else to help you. You need someone else to help you in this phase because the clarity's there, but I kind of wanted some validation. I kind of want to you start to dream like, oh man, this is like my album release, or like a movie or documentary, right? You kind of like it's writing a book is really dope. It's a cool thing, right? And it feels good. And you have this like vision of like everybody buying it and like reading it and like exploring it and like again validating you as an
Yeah.
author, as a creative, and that perfume really takes up the room at first.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It takes up a lot of room. And that's okay. It's okay to have that. I think like be delusional. Why not? It's a
Right.
creative project. Why not? It's like a painting, anything else. But that cologne should and will wear off.
Yep.
And then you're standing there.
Yep.
So do you naturally smell good? Right? Or do you are
Have
you
you taken
faking
a
the
shower
bullshit?
recently?
Yeah, right. Are you faking are you just masking the
Yes.
bullshit? Right?
Yes.
Because if it's bullshit, eventually it'll get snuffed out. And
Yes.
that means the reader can't get past a few pages. That means your publisher, your editor, whoever's working with you is just like, man, let me get this project out of my way. This person just wants the perfume and it's clearly shit. Right.
Yeah.
And we're just being real here. This is what I love about these conversations, just keeping it real open. So how do you, you talk about, which I love this next phase of how you help people go from um, writing with flow instead of force,
Yeah.
which, oh, man, I genuinely felt that in my writing. I went from
hmm
forcing it, and then within like hours of leaving the workshop on the plane, I was crying while I was writing
Mm,
because I was so excited to, because now I had like a formula to write,
yeah.
right? Because Emily and Chaz and Tucker were so good at literally taking the perfume out of the room, right? And just being
Yep.
like, here's your shit, here's how we're gonna write about it,
Yep.
right? And I remember like being on the plane and just writing, and it just like I couldn't stop writing. And from that moment on, it was just like flowed, and I didn't feel like I was forcing it anymore.
Yeah.
I was excited to kind of come back to it. How does that happen? How do like I know how it happened for me in a way, but like how do you create the magic for an author to get there?
I think I mean that's the $1,000,000 question, right? Like everybody wants to know the formula to create flow.
Of course.
Of course we want that. So the best I can figure is if you take the words fairly literally and you picture like a river flowing,
Mm,
um, and what that requires for a river to like really be flowing. First of all, I think the thing to remember is that that has force. The flow of a river is a really forceful thing. So you don't have to, there's not like a one or the other. Like if we only focus on flow, then we're not gonna move in the direction that we need to or have the productivity we need to. Or there is massive force to flow, and you can trust that. But some things that obviously would stop a river or stop flow would be obstacles like a dam, or if there are giant rocks in the way, then it has to move around and do something else. So you can look for what your obstacles are. And I think sometimes a lot of the hustle bro dynamic in nonfiction especially acts like you can just force your way through those obstacles.
mm,
um, I think you can go around them. If you know that you can't write every single day, don't go around them. You know, if you know that your this one chapter is hanging you up and it's the next chapter to write and you cannot make it happen, go around it. And that might be skipping that chapter for now and coming back to it. It might be talking it out instead of writing it down. It might be pausing to get a coach to help you sort through it. But just sitting down and going, I have to grind it out. I have to write more words. I have to make it happen. Forcing it isn't going to necessarily get you the outcome that you want. So look for your obstacles. Don't be afraid to go around them. Like you'll wear them down over time. You don't have to pick them up and move them. You don't have to like redirect the whole river. You don't have to like push and focus all of your energy on the one obstacle until it explodes. Just go around it. Find where there is flow and trust that, and then you can deal with whatever you might have skipped and gone around later. It'll be taken care of. The other thing is there are riverbanks, right? There are constraints to a river. And those expand over time. If there's enough force coming through, if there's enough water coming through, those riverbanks will expand over time. But rivers are channels that move in pretty constrained areas that are relatively predictable. And so looking back on your life and figuring out what kinds of constraints have led to flow for you before. So how have you done those keynotes or created the workshops that you've ran or the training sessions that you've developed, or how have the mentoring conversations that you've really loved having, how have those come about? Any other time that you've communicated your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge in the past can give you a lot of insight as to what kinds of constraints, what kinds of riverbanks you already flow in, and you can translate that to your book. So if you are so good at creating PowerPoints for your work, draft your book in PowerPoint. There's no one stopping you from doing that. If you're a post-it note fiend, draft your book on post-it notes. Keep going in those spaces until it expands beyond that, and now you're like ready to stretch that a little bit further and try something new. But there's no reason to try and force yourself out of a flow that already works for you just because this is a book. You're already good at communicating your wisdom. You're already good at communicating with the people that matter to you and that you want to change with this message. So live in that as much as possible, because the amount of content that you're creating is already a stretch. It's already a challenge. Don't add an artificial challenge to that by going, well, this is how real writers write, so that's how I have to do it too. Stay in what's comfortable and then stretch in the ways that are necessary. I call it stretching without pulling a muscle. Like, you have to
Ooh,
stretch in little bits at a time. You can't just like throw yourself into that new yoga pose and expect that it's going to work.
that's really well said. Thank you. I love the river flowing analogy. Very much makes sense. I hope that resonates with everyone. Okay, so you have this idea of you say that your book falls somewhere between a calling card and a calling, which I really love. Can you elaborate on that?
I think it's a whole lot like the perfume and the bullshit, honestly. I think that, a calling card, there's probably a long and storied history to them. But if we just go back to like a business card, right? Like, that used to be what was left behind after an interaction. Like, here, let me give you my card. Shake a hand, go on. Like, that was what was left behind so that this good interaction could then turn into something else. And if you had a card, it meant something. You only got a card assigned to you if you had some kind of role. And then Vistaprint came along. And like, do you know how many thousands of business cards I've printed over the years? Because I'm like, I have an idea. It needs a business card. And then I would get this box of business card. And my husband was like, do we have room for more business cards? Like, what are you doing with these now? It just became so easy and cheap and quick. And then it was like a mask of authority. If you had a business card, then it still for a little while meant that you must mean something. But we could generate them in seconds for pennies. It was bullshit. It didn't mean anything anymore. And then books started getting treated like the new business card, right? Like,
Mm,
for the same reasons, because it used to mean all of these ideas in our head about being chosen and being externally validated and blah, blah, blah. If you had a book, but then you could self-publish a book. And a lot of business card books were bullshit. They became too easy to make.
mm,
And that's not to say that it's ever easy, but if you there are ways to produce a book as a product that doesn't require you to get that internal clarity and do that deep dive and care about your reader and your message. We see it sometimes in memoirs that are just trauma dumping. We see it in business books that like they all quote the same people and tell the same stories and get the same formula out, and they're not really giving us anything new. And I mean, I cut my teeth in content on website content writing, and then That was before Amazon. And then Amazon happened, and then people were like, let's turn our blogs into books. And we just created a ton of bullshit books, right? Because it was easy. That kind of book, readers are tired of, and they don't change the world. They don't change any corner of the world. They don't change any person because you weren't changed while you were writing it. So, calling card is one end of the spectrum that is more possible than ever thanks to AI. You can churn out a bullshit book in a couple minutes if you want to. Just throw some prompts in, put some content together, put it on Amazon, hope they don't catch you and pull it down because it's AI content and call it a day. Like you could do that and you could let it be a bullshit Vistaprint calling card. The other end of the pendulum swings over to calling, where you're like, no, I refuse to do a calling card bullshit book because this is representative of my calling. And I think the mistake, if we go all the way to the calling side, is if you think the book is your calling, you're never going to finish it. It'll take you so long because you're putting basically a whole life's pursuit writing on 50,000 words, which let's be real, if that's what you think your book is, it's going to show up to me at like 130,000 words. Like there's no way you're going to condense it. But your whole life is now writing on this one moment in time of writing and publishing a book, and that's not real either, because I think there's some things inside of us that want that to be real because that would mean you're done, right? I just have to make this really, really good. And when it's really, really good, then I have done my work and it'll everything else will fall into place. But that's not real. Your calling is so far beyond the book. That's why I love what you do, because you're refocusing the author on what it is they want to do in the world and how the book fits into that, rather than how is the book gonna become your vehicle or whatever it is that people think is
Mhm.
gonna happen. But that's a lot of work. That's an ongoing act of having the conversations and making the work happen and living out your calling indefinitely. So the book can't actually be the calling. Your calling is beyond it. But somewhere in between, you're writing something that's going to further your calling in the world, but maybe
Mm.
can take some of that ease of, yeah, this is just representative of what I'm doing right now so that I can hand it to a person and the connection that we made can live on after we part ways, like a calling card would have. Um, and if they want to, then they can join me in this pursuit of this calling. And we have to calibrate that to be able to pursue a book
Right.
without cutting corners or getting completely lost in the bigness of it.
Beautifully said. I love that. Yeah, this idea of the pendulum swinging between this really BS thing that's out here to the super deep, and it's just all about me. And there's somewhere in the middle where the energy can really exist. I love that. Okay, so talk to me about one thing, just one thing. This is kind of what I want to wrap with here. One thing that if an author can focus on in the next couple of weeks as they sort of approach writing their book or second book or anything like that, what's one thing you would give them as homework, if you will, to sort of work on or think through?
Yeah, I would say, I would say go do that exercise of imagining yourself handing the book to a real person. I just did an episode on this, like a little 5 or 10 minute episode. So go imagine that and get that person so real in your head that like maybe it makes you cry, maybe it makes you really excited, whatever comes up. Make that really real, and then this is gonna sound weird. It's very Sherlock. Create a writer's room in your head, and only that person and younger you is invited, but a really specific younger you. So younger you just at the moment where you were about to realize the thing that you're writing about. So if you're
Mm,
writing about transformation as a leader, there was a you that had to go through a whole lot before you had that transformation. And if you write to all of the yous that still had to learn a whole lot of things, then you're going to be in, that's a lot of versions of yourself. But the
Mm.
person who's ready to change is the person that your book will change them. Your book will become a catalyst for them because they're ready. So younger you at the moment of change, that person that you envision handing your book to, and then present you, who is writing the book, the three of you are invited to that writer's room in your head, and they are at your little like mini conference table or coffee shop or whatever your writer's room looks like, and that's who you confer with when you're writing. There's no more, is this good? It's, does this make sense to younger you? And could you see yourself saying this out loud to that person that you envisioned? That's your measuring stick for all of the content that you write. And there's no more what is the next chapter, or what's the next thing that's right to write. It's what's the next thing they need to hear? What's the next thing I would say if we were in conversation? And those become your gauge for what you need to write next and how you've written, like whether you've done your work so far, rather than any kind of external generic assessment, like is this good or bad? Let them guide your writing process, and they've got you.
That is such a great way to wrap this, because not only is that good homework, that's a good practice, because before you decide whether this is good or bad, we need to flesh it out. You need to think
Yep.
this through. You need to gauge it somehow. And such a cool sort of exercise with this invite of going to your space mentally, closing your eyes for a minute, inviting the right person, inviting the younger version of you that meets that person, and thinking from that perspective, and thinking about what you're about to share. Is this useful? Is this helpful? Is the story transformational? Is what you're about to say, captivating, meaningful, impactful?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be all of those things. Sometimes you need to flush out a bunch of stuff to kind of find those components. But that's a great exercise. Thank you for sharing that. All right, one last thing.
Yeah.
Promise. One last thing. I gotta know, what's your favorite book of all time?
Oh, don't ask me that question. I don't
You're
do
one of the first
favorites.
people I've asked that question,
My
but
kids
I
know
want
this.
to
They've
ask
stopped
it.
asking me. I don't do favorites. I'm so bad at them. But I will tell you that recently, 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gadsby rocked my world. There's so many brilliant little nuggets in there about how they created the show Nanette, but also how to not trauma dump on your readers and
Mm,
not traumatize yourself while you're creating. Um, it it's impeccable. I kept being
love
like reading a little bit, and then I would keep reading it like out loud, like, let me just read you this line. And then I'm like reading 3 pages because I couldn't stop. It's gorgeous.
love it. Beautiful. Well, Brannan, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. I love working with you. I love that I get to hang out and work with the authors that you shared with me. It's truly been a pleasure, and I have a feeling we're going to be doing a few more of these in the year, because there's so much more to talk about and so much more I want to bring to the table. Um, but I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah,
Appreciate you, my
thank you
friend.
so much. Keep doing
Yeah,
this. It's amazing.
thank you. All right, friends. See you later. Peace.